It begins in silence, not the peaceful kind, the charged kind, the kind that hums with pressure. It's 3:42 a.m., and in a house overlooking Lake Como, a man stares at his reflection in a window that disappears into the dark. The water beyond is still. Inside, he ties his running shoes with surgical precision, clicks the start button on his stopwatch, and steps into the blackness. This man is not an athlete. He's a billionaire hedge fund manager with 3 phones, 20 employees, and one rule: start before the world can interrupt you. 3,000 miles away, in a narrow Tokyo apartment, another light flickers on. 4:11 a.m. A kettle hisses gently on the stove. A young woman, CEO of a robotics empire, folds her futon away, places her journal on the floor, and begins writing. 30 minutes. No editing, no thinking. Just pouring her mind out like bloodletting, purging every dream, every fear, every ambition before the day begins. She doesn't look at her phone. She hasn't in 5 years. These stories don't show up in self-help books. There are no hashtags, no viral videos, only patterns, precise, personal, unshakable. And the deeper you look, the more it begins to feel less like routine and more like ritual. Because the moment the sun is up, it's too late. In Silicon Valley, in a glass fortress lined with standing desks and soundproof booths, an alarm whispers into the ear of a man who hasn't slept more than 4 hours in a decade. 4:59 a.m. He opens his eyes, not with a groan, but with a grin. His feet hit the cold marble floor, and he walks straight to a cryo chamber hidden in his private bathroom. 2 minutes at -110 degrees C, not to wake up, but to shock his system awake. Then green juice, meditation, emails, all before his competitors' alarms even buzz. But this isn't about the rich or the famous. This is about obsession. About what people hide in the earliest hours of their lives. About the quiet war being fought every morning, in every city, by people who refuse to let the day happen to them. In a cabin in Montana, a former Navy SEAL, now author and speaker, sharpens a blade on his front porch. It's 5 a.m. sharp. No talking, no noise. Just steel scraping against stone. He will not touch his phone until noon. He believes morning is sacred, a place to train the mind before the world contaminates it. And in Paris, 5:12 a.m., a woman pulls her curtains open, facing the Eiffel Tower. She lights a single candle. She doesn't pray, but she breathes. Deep, slow, controlled. She's a fashion mogul with meetings in Milan, but for 45 minutes she belongs to no one. What unites them is not wealth, not power, not even discipline. It's something stranger, something eerie. A belief that before the noise, there is magic. A kind of magic the rest of the world sleeps through. Because while most people are tangled in dreams, these people are already building empires. In New Delhi, under the orange haze of street lamps still clinging to the night, a man in his 60s walks barefoot on the cold marble of a temple courtyard. 4:27 a.m. He is a tech founder with 15 patents to his name. But here, he's just another silhouette moving in silence. He finishes his walk, sits cross-legged, and breathes until the lines between him and the air begin to blur. He believes stillness gives him an edge, not to control the world, but to stop it from controlling him. Across the ocean, inside a minimalist condo in Manhattan, a young woman writes a single sentence on her bathroom mirror in red lipstick. Show up like the world depends on it. 4:45 a.m. She's a startup CEO in the middle of a funding war. Every day she reads one page of The Art of War, drinks black coffee laced with lion's mane powder, and spends 20 silent minutes staring at her vision board like it's a military map. Her morning is a battle plan, and she follows it like doctrine. But here's what nobody tells you. These routines, so carefully curated, so rigorously followed, aren't for show. They're shields, weapons, armor against chaos. Because when you're running countries or companies or carrying the pressure of millions, you need something to keep the wolves at bay. In Cape Town, a man who grew up on dirt floors now controls an empire of shipping routes and logistics. His mornings are not poetic. They're brutal. 3:33 a.m. He wakes to a cold shower, not because it's trendy, but because it's a test. A moment of voluntary discomfort before the real pain of decisions, deadlines, and betrayals begins. He lifts weights in darkness, screams into a towel, and writes his goals while dripping sweat onto the page. And in Reykjavik, Iceland, under violet skies and frozen air, a writer with 5 bestsellers and no social media presence wraps herself in wool, steps outside, and walks a narrow path by the sea. 5:03 a.m. She whispers her book ideas into a recorder, one line at a time, as the wind threatens to steal her voice. When she returns home, she types until sunrise. She says the world is loud enough already. Mornings are for whispering truths no one else will hear. But not all routines are beautiful. Some are obsessive, some even dangerous. There's a man in Zurich who hasn't missed a single 4 a.m. wake-up in 16 years. He records everything. Heart rate, REM cycles, bowel movements, water intake. His walls are lined with whiteboards, tracking patterns, searching for edges. He built a fortune in data analysis. Now he's applying it to himself. He believes productivity is a code, that every minute has a pattern, that success is math, not magic. Yet in every one of these stories, there's a common pulse, a sacred window of time, the hours between 3 and 6 a.m., a realm where ego dissolves, decisions aren't reactive, and the world has no claim on you yet. They all believe in this window, because once the phone buzzes, once the emails come in, once the city wakes, the spell is broken. In an underground apartment in Berlin, lit only by a blue Himalayan salt lamp, a 27-year-old coder begins every morning with the same ritual: 100 push-ups, 20 minutes of silence, and one question whispered to himself in German. Wem gehört dieser Tag? Who owns this day? He answers the same every single morning. Ich. I do. Then he opens his terminal and starts writing code as if the world depends on it, because to him it does. There's a strange power to the early hours, one that doesn't exist at 9 a.m. or noon or after dinner when the noise has already taken hold. It's the difference between acting and reacting, between designing your life or being dragged through it. The most successful people in the world don't start early because it's trendy. They start early because they know what happens if they don't. In Dubai, a real estate titan kneels in prayer at 4:18 a.m., the call to Fajr echoing through the skyline. In that moment, with forehead to the ground and glass towers rising around him, he is nothing and everything. When he finishes, he writes in a leather-bound journal, not what he must do today, but who he must become. Thousands of miles away on a beach in Santa Monica, a barefoot entrepreneur jogs at sunrise, but not for health, not for dopamine. He runs to remind himself he's alive. He once lost everything, addicted, homeless, forgotten. Now he builds apps that teach people how to recover what he did. Every morning he runs with a rock in his hand. On it, one word: gratitude. But perhaps the strangest routine belongs to a woman in Seoul. She owns a tech empire you've probably never heard of, but use every day. She sleeps from 8 p.m. to 2:30 a.m. sharp. 6 hours, never more, never less. She believes sleeping too long makes her forget her purpose. By 3 a.m., she's reading biographies of war generals while sipping herbal tea brewed with mushroom powder and crushed pearls. By 5 a.m., she's meditating. By 6 a.m., she's had 4 hours of quiet work. The world hasn't even had coffee yet, and maybe that's the point. The world is chasing sunlight, but the powerful, they rise before it. They don't follow time. They bend it. They stretch it. They own it. Not because they're faster or smarter, but because they understand a secret most will never learn. That in those first sacred hours, when no one's watching, you decide who you are. No crowd, no noise, no pressure. Just the still hum of a quiet world, and the choice to either let the day shape you, or to shape the day. And every single one of them, from the billionaire in Italy to the monk in Montana, has already made that choice, long before you ever hit snooze.